Welcome to the Crossview Commons, a brand new podcast focusing on the ministries, ministry partners, and the people of Crossview Church. My name is Mark Lansing, and it's my pleasure to share with you what God's doing in and through Crossview Church in DeKalb, Illinois. Today, I have with me my good friend, Greg Wheaton. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Mark.
All right, thanks for getting up early and joining me on this Saturday morning.
Indeed.
It's fun to have you here. So, Greg, you and I have known each other for a little while, but we met here at the church and ended up doing a few things together. But tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Greg Wheaton?
So we've been coming here for 15 or 16 years, one of those two. And Kim is my wife, and I have 3 kids. Lucy is 14, Augie is 10, and then I have a 1-year-old, Charlie.
Yay!
And I teach math at Elgin Community College, and those are the things that take up most of my time.
Yeah. But there are some other things about you that not everyone would know, like your affinity for heavy metal and electric guitar.
Yeah, I've been making some heavy metal music with a friend, and I rock climb. That's a big hobby. And also I play backgammon. That's kind of a recent hobby that I've been really nerding out with. So. Yeah,
I think we were at a social event a couple of years ago, and you were playing, and you guys taught me a little bit because I'd never played before. It's actually really fun.
It's a great game.
Yeah, and we should pull that out again sometime. I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, you've been here for a long time. I've been here coming on 9 years, actually, so you were here a few years before us. Can you tell us about some of the ways that you've served at Crossview? How have you plugged in? I know you've done a lot with youth and other things, but can you flesh that out for us a little bit?
Yeah, initially we were on the worship team a lot. I played guitar, and Kim played guitar and sang, and sometimes I sang, and sometimes we led even, like in seasons where our worship pastor was gone. And then we volunteered with the youth group under a couple youth pastors, and small groups, involved in some small groups, and then I was on the pastoral search team for Pastor Jeff.
Oh, yeah.
And then
you led
Elder.
That search. Didn't you chair it?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
And then Elder was the most recent big thing for 6 years. So.
Right. Do you still work with youth?
Not really.
Okay.
We kind of rub shoulders with them occasionally. Like Kim will have some of them over. And
sure.
I keep in touch with some who have moved on. From the youth group.
Yeah, that's cool. I remember I'd come into whatever coffee shop, I think often Starbucks or Panera, and you'd have a couple of guys there. You had a small group of teens from the high school group, I believe.
Yeah, yep. So enjoyable.
Yeah, those are good times. And you told us more recently, well, I know this, you and I believe, started on the elder team at the same time, and we ended at the same time just a couple months ago now.
Yep.
And I have my perspective.
Yeah, I could be interviewing you about this.
I'm still sort of debriefing myself on a lot of that because it was a big commitment, right? And it was good. I'm happy to have done it. I'm just wondering, what was that like for you? What are some of your reflections? I know that there were some good times and some really good discussions, but there were hard things as well. I mean, how have you wrapped your mind around all of that? Have you had time to sort of decompress and reflect yet?
Yeah, prior to becoming an elder, when I was on the pastoral search team, we did a self-study of our church with Pastor Marty Volz, and in that study we kind of dug into like different roles of staff and elders and who makes these decisions and those decisions. And at that time, I really saw that the elders had a lot on their plates, like including a lot of just logistical, detailed stuff about the building, budget stuff. So I when I got asked to become an elder, I knew what I was getting into, that a large part of the conversations would be around some of those logistical things. But I was still excited about, like, trying to have conversations around vision and like where our church is headed and strategy for getting there and stuff like that. That's what was really exciting to me at first to talk about.
Yeah, I think that's where you and I maybe receive the most energy. Talking about vision, where are we going, where are we now? But then, right in the middle of all of that, we were hit with a global pandemic, right? And the palette of our conversations changed dramatically, like the rest of the world, right? We're not unique in that. But having to go through that season, I just wonder, is there anything that stands out to you from that period of time, right around, 2019? So just, 4 years ago now, right?
Yeah, a lot of frequent conversation because everything was changing so quickly.
Yeah.
So we just had to meet often to talk about, first of all, were we going to meet as a church still, during some of those weeks? And then it became more in like, how are we doing financially? There was conversations about getting money from the government.
Right.
Should we do that? And then the masking and how do we move on but love our neighbor and be sensitive to a lot of people like all across the spectrum of how people are viewing this thing, right?
Right. Yeah, there was no getting it right during that time is what I realized.
A lot of gray.
No matter what we did, honestly, it'd be easy for someone or some group to disagree, right?
Yes.
Because no matter what you chose to do with masking, with meeting, with distancing, it was, in a way, a polarizing time. However, I feel our unity was maintained throughout. It wasn't divisive for our church. We were able to weather that, and things held together okay in terms of our unity, is my reflection anyway. You remember it that way?
Yeah, I think we did the best that we could. Mm-hmm. And I don't say that to mean like we really messed it up, but that's all that we knew how to do at the time. Like, I really do think we did a good job of balancing things and being mindful of other people. And I think that was the hardest thing, though, is like among the elders, there was not unity sometimes in terms of our opinions on things, and some disagreement. So when you're trying to lead a larger group of people, but you don't agree yourselves, sometimes the decisions you make aren't the best that you personally think that you would make, but it's just a good, collaborative effort and a together decision.
Yeah, I remember. We didn't have 100% agreement on our elder team on a couple of issues, but it was ultimately okay. I know I was wrong about some things. I came out, in favor of government money and things like that, and that was difficult for some people at the church. It was one of those things we weren't sure what the financial outlook was going to be. It was really, an uncertain time. I'm really glad that wisdom dictated that we didn't go that route, because as it turns out, we're fine, right?
Yeah, thank
and the
God.
Lord's been faithful. Our people have been generous, and so we're in a really good place. Continue to be so. Well, now we have high inflation and a different financial outlook. How's Bitcoin doing?
Well, it's not as bad as it, but we should have bought low at the bottom there. So.
Right. Well, there have been ups and downs. Also reflecting right at the beginning of the pandemic, we had the George Floyd incident and racial divisiveness. We had protests and whatnot right in our area. We've had a lot of discussions about women's role in the church at Crossview. We're complementarian, but we're still figuring out to what degree and things like that. While those were hard conversations, they were the kinds of conversations I wanted to have, right? And I was pleased to be a part of a group that would engage in that anyway. Though I don't know that much has changed on some levels. Still, we didn't duck and cover when those kinds of issues came up.
Yeah, I think there were enough of us in that elder room to say, let's sink our teeth into these things and talk about them more. And that wasn't always the sentiment of everyone, though, which was hard. But I was glad that we had some good conversations around those things.
And we have more conversations to come. I know these issues aren't dead. We have a lot more growing to do, right?
Yeah.
But again, I'll reflect on our unity. We haven't made any of these issues, like the single issue for CrossFit to handle, right? They're not defining. They haven't been definitive because we have Jesus at the center, and feel that though we have different points of view, and sometimes I wish people were a little bit more evolved on some issues, they're still my brothers and sisters in Christ. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. I'm just saying that's the value of our church, right? That has been given to me, really.
Yeah. And I think we mentioned this during the pandemic. The hard thing around that time was there are these important issues, but it seemed like the only way that we could converse about them was on social media or digital platforms, and we're still figuring out what it means to get back together physically.
Yeah.
And those conversations really need to happen there, face to face.
Right.
And with respect and not anonymity.
Right. One of the endeavors that emerged during our time on the elder team, we recognized that our pastor Jeff was shouldering just a ton of load with regard to personal counseling and marital counseling. And that was a genesis of some conversations that both you and I were a part of. But I really feel like you stepped up and helped us navigate some ways to help Jeff. And I just wonder if you want to talk about, what was the genesis of what has become the Deep Soul Care team? I'm alluding to it a little bit, but you really latched on to it. Can you tell us a little bit about your process and how you led us through to where we are now, really?
Yeah. As elders, we did notice Jeff being more and more busy meeting with people, going through hard stuff, especially marriage stuff. And so we thought, how can we help support Jeff and maybe even provide some additional counsel for people? But we were like, we need some training for that. Jeff has had some training, and we a lot of us haven't. So I did some research and looked at some different people and organizations where we can get training, and I presented to the elders some options and my recommendation for where to start, which was to discuss these things with Glenn and Susie, who are a part of Green Twig Conciliators. And I know Glenn and Susie through my best friend Stefan out in Washington. They have been his coaches and mentors, and just so much more to him. And so he recommended that we talk to them and get some training. They had training with peacemakers and do a lot of intensive marital counseling. So we kind of started there and did 5 sessions with them and just trained in general counseling strategies, good questions to ask to kind of peel back the layers of people's emotions and beliefs and desires, to really sit with people and listen to them. We talked a little bit about confession of sin and also topics like humility, and then later on abuse and trauma, which kind of was really interesting to our group and sent us off to explore that a little bit more.
Yeah, the time with, they were Green Twig Conciliators, Glenn and Susie. That went really deep. So the way I remember it is, okay, when you counsel people, here's what you do. And we were kind of the guinea pigs, right? We were receiving that counseling as a group. And it was a little bit terrifying for me because I felt like I was going to be prodded to be transparent on issues where maybe I wasn't ready to talk in front of a group and things like that. Yeah, it was really respectful and nobody was put on a spot. However, I will say, kind of like when I went through Formed with Jeff, you end up sharing more than what you might expect because it's a high trust environment. when Susie generated that, like Jeff does Informed, right? So it was kind of a similar experience to me in some ways, where I ended up confessing some things, and sharing some things that maybe I didn't think I was prepared to, but it was healing to me in a lot of ways. Just being prepared to lead others in those kinds of conversations.
Yeah, because I think we need to experience that, to some degree in order to help others experience that.
Yeah, so that was golden. That was highly memorable. I'm so glad that we went through that and to go through that together. I really appreciated that. The next step, if I remember correctly, was to kind of solidify that Deep Soul Care Team group, right? And we had some people come on, some people step off, and yet we were building more of a team. One of the things I remember we centered on was Darby Strickland's book, and the title's escaping me right now, but we read that together as a group.
Yeah, Is It Abuse?
Is It Abuse? Thank you.
Yeah, by Darby Strickland.
That was a hard read.
Yes, very hard. For me, extremely enlightening. Like the light just shone in the room, and I'm just like, wow, this is the world that some people experience, oppressively, especially women in marriages, outside of marriages, even in Christian marriages. A lot of this abuse, various forms of abuse, and then also like this is the oppressor and what they're like, and the world that they're trying to build for themselves. It was just so enlightening. So maybe we could back up too, because I forgot to mention this was just a group of elders that started this along with spouses.
Yeah.
It's just like a pilot group trying to figure out, what's the best way to get trained to help Jeff and to help our congregation, providing that additional counsel. And so we went through the Darby Strickland book, Is It Abuse? And had some great conversation around that. And that led us to want to include some others in our group who had some experience revolving these issues. And so we added a couple people to our group. We also had some new elders come aboard, and so we invited them and their spouses. So it's kind of been in flux, like who's been on the team, but I think, like you said, we've maintained a core.
Yeah, I feel like we've solidified, and now we're talking about methodology for onboarding others, realizing that's not going to be easy because, of all the work that we went through. One of the key pieces that you brought to us was the material, how to become a church. I'm bad with titles.
Yeah, becoming a church that cares well for the abused.
Yeah, that was a whole program combined with video and with
like a workbook,
the manuscript, basically, with questions and whatnot. And some really important key voices that people would recognize. Darby Strickland was a part of that, and Rachel Dellen. How do you say her last name?
I don't remember.
Yeah, that's okay, but people will know who I'm talking about. Important voice on issues of abuse. Talk to us a little bit about that. I mean, again, all of these elements were really important to me, and as I'm thinking about, I really grew a lot through engaging in these things. But about this material, how'd you find it, and how was that perhaps meaningful to you?
Yeah, I think, honestly, the Darby Strickland book, I feel like I got more out of. It was just deeper in terms of the experience of the abused or the oppressed in a relationship, and the desires and lies that the oppressor is feeling and experiencing. But I think the workbook and the video series we went through as well was helpful, because that got into more specific, like, logistical church stuff. Like, hey, what if a pastor is accused of this, or some other leader? What policies do you have in place? Do you know your local, DCFS and safe passage protocols, like, that they have in place for reporting and things like that? So that was helpful in having some more of those detailed logistical conversations. I'm using the word logistics a lot.
It's okay.
That's great.
Well, Well, have a little game every time you say logistics.
Go back and edit that word out. Just like look up a bunch of synonyms, right?
I'll make a little sound effect every time. That's okay, because it's actually appropriate. A lot of where we saw gaps in our church is we didn't have, we're still building processes, right? What happens when this does come up? Mm-hmm. One of the striking things in Strickland's Is It Abuse is she helped us understand statistically, because this is happening so often in so many different households, no matter what socioeconomic status is, what your background is, there's abuse going on. And because of the rate of abuse that's happening, you can be sure that in a congregation of our size, which is a little bit less than 300 on a weekly basis, there are things going on that need to be addressed that may be cloaked at the moment.
Yeah.
But light needs to be shown, right? And we need to provide people a space where they can tell us, hey, what's going on and how can we help you? Not that we're looking to bust people in any way. We're looking to support and help those who are oppressed,
like
right?
To say we know you're there
and
are experiencing it. Because like what I've learned is the experience of people in these types of situations is it's very dark, it's very lonely, it's very cyclical. It's like they can't get out. And there's so much shame and other things around disclosing that to other people and fear of ramifications that to literally hear someone say, hey, I know you're there and we know this happens and we're not surprised and we're here and we just want to listen and sit with you.
Yeah. There are a couple of ways that the team has now begun opening doors to receive people. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the methods that we're using?
Yeah, so we have an email address now with the church. We put some signs in the bathroom with some contact information and people, just so people know we're here and we're aware that
signs in the bathroom. Hard. Can you tell us why we did that?
Yeah, it's a private thing to stare at a sign and copy down contact info. If people see you doing that, you might feel something, right?
Right.
So, and then we also are providing a space and time between the two services every Sunday in the library. If anyone wants to come in and pray, there's always going to be 2 members of our team in there, 1 female, 1 male, and we'll pray, we'll listen, whatever you want to share during that time.
That's great. Yeah, I get to be a part of that. Tomorrow is our turn, and so I'm excited to do that. That's great, Greg. We've come a long way, and not that we're doing it perfectly, because I know we still have a lot to learn, and but I mean, we have a team, the Deep Soul Care Team, as it's now called. We have some signage up. We have some methods to reach people who might need a way to reach out to us quietly, right? Also, I'm remembering you mentioned Safe Passage. That's organization in our area that helps people find resources if they are in situations where they need to get out or away, or if they're stuck, right?
Yeah, like a refuge. Resources.
Right. We also had an attorney who's part of our church come and speak about what it means to be a mandated reporter for kiddos, right?
Yeah, we had some training with that.
Yeah. So it's been a ton. So I'm thinking about all these different things that we've done, and just how long have we existed?
Like a year and a few months.
Yeah, right. It's been a great deal of growth. I mean, with Glenn and Susie, I feel like we started a little bit before that, but I
feel like it was like October. September, October. Or something.
Wow. So it's been a journey.
Yeah, and then recently, so like a big thing about our group is like, again, we're just learning and training because we just know we need this ourselves. So we're going through like an audio training through Respero Ministries out in California on anxiety right now, which overlaps with like depression and some other mental health topics. So I think we're wanting to learn more about that, what people are experiencing with that, and what we don't know. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions. And personally, I feel like what's helped me maybe even more than the Darby Strickland book and our time with Glenn and Susie, is just personal counseling I've experienced in the last year and a half, and also marital counseling, because getting that depth of counseling, like all the, like, your feelings, like that affective domain, the beliefs, what you're thinking and believing about yourself and others, that the cognitive domain, these are things that Glenn and Susie talked to us about. And then the volitional domain, which is like what you're wanting, what you're desiring. All those things just get exposed and are on the table to look at. And you're literally with a counselor who knows and is trained in how to ask good questions. So I'm like a sponge, and I'm also a teacher. So whenever I get taught, I immediately think about how I can teach this stuff and implement it in my own life and help others implement that in their lives. So that's been really helpful for me and has really, like, garnered a passion to just grow myself in, like, these topics of, like, counseling and delving into these things, and then help others do that as well.
Yeah, I came up in generations where you didn't really talk about these kinds of things, where you dealt with things very much internally. You didn't put things out on the table, right?
Yeah.
But I appreciate your advocacy for, like, if you need help, get help, right? If you're struggling in your marriage, don't just try and fix it behind closed doors. You need to share that out. There's so many services available, recommendations that can be made, right? Don't weather through. And if there's abuse, neglect, any form of oppression, there's no reason not to reach out. We're here to help, right?
Yeah. There's a proverb. It says, plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. And I feel we believe that, but only when it comes to within the church and friends and pastors. When we think about paying somebody else who's been specially trained to give counsel, we think, oh, you have to be at the bottom of the barrel to do that, or like something's on the fritz, like your marriage or something, or, but it's just another way to get really good counsel. And fortunately, my job offers really good insurance, and so it's pretty much paid for. Sure. It's like free. It's almost free counseling. It's so great. So that's been, I think, otherwise it's so expensive. It's so expensive.
Right.
And I understand why people, it's a big commitment to pull the trigger and do that,
Well, Greg, I am proud to be a part of a church that's helping people with some form of safety nets, right? And not that we can do it all, but we can help people find resources that they need in order to heal, to become well, and to be safe. I think that's a pretty good explanation of where we've come, and I want to thank you for being here this morning, Greg. I really have enjoyed working with you in these past years.
Yeah, you too, Mark.
And I think we should meet again. There are so many different things that we like to talk about.
Oh, yes.
And so we'll have to have you on again sometime soon, okay?
Awesome. Thanks, Mark.
Well, thank you for joining us. Reminding you that our services are on Sundays, 9 a.m. and 10:45, and they're streaming online at both times. For more information on Crossview, visit our website at crossviewefca.com.